السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله لا الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد فيا عباد الله أوصيكم وإياي بتقوى الله عز وجل القائل سبحانه بعد أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. والقائل سبحانه إن الصفا والمروة من شعائر الله فمن حج البيت أو اعتمر فلا جناح عليه أن يطوف بهما. We begin by praising Allah, the Most High. We begin by thanking Allah for His countless blessings, for His endless mercy, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we begin by reminding ourselves to fear Allah, to be conscious of Allah as He deserves, as He tells us in His holy book, after seeking refuge with Him from the outcasts, saying, "O you who believe, fear Allah, be conscious of Allah as He deserves, and do not die except on the state of Islam." We ask Allah to make us amongst those who fear Him, who are conscious of Him the way He deserves, and above all else, we beg Allah to make us from those who leave this world on a state of pure submission, on a state of Islam. We ask Allah to make us conscious of Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who tells us of the practice of walking between the hills and of Safa and Marwa in the Quran. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, indeed, the Safa and Marwa, the hills of Safa and Marwa, which are part of the rituals of Hajj, they are from the signs of Allah. This ritual is ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So whoever performs Hajj, whoever performs the pilgrimage or Umrah, then let them perform the ritual of walking between these two hills. Aisha radiallahu anha, may Allah be pleased with her, narrates in Sahih Bukhari, and Suyuti also mentioned in his Asbab al-Nuzul, the reasons for revelation of certain ayat. Regarding this ayah, it was revealed because when the companions of the Prophet ﷺ went to perform the pilgrimage with the Prophet ﷺ, when it came time to this ritual in particular, this walking between the hills of Safa and Marwa, the companions, especially the Ansar, were a bit hesitant, were a bit, you could say, reluctant, because this was a practice that they were accustomed to in their days prior to Islam, in their days that they would call the days of ignorance, prior to revelation, prior to the advent of Islam, and prior to them accepting Islam. So they were hesitant, and they really felt that hesitation until this verse was revealed when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explicitly said, إِنَّ الصَّفَا وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ, that for sure the Safa and the Marwa, this ritual, this part of Hajj, has been ordained by Allah. Yes, it may have devolved over the years and become a paganistic ritual that you used to do prior to Islam, but at the end of the day, this is something ordained from Allah. There's no hesitation, there's no urgency. Go and perform this part of the Hajj. And if this scenario sounds familiar, it should. It should. This struggle between one's popular culture and the norms and the things that they're used to in their society and what they perceive to be their religion. The struggle between being Meccan and being Muslim. The struggle between being from the Aus and the Khazraj and being Muslim. This struggle is one that plays out over and over again, perpetually, until the end of time. And it's of no surprise that we face the same struggle. We feel as if we're caught between being Muslim and being American, but clearly this so-called identity crisis is not unique to us. As we see time and time again in the seerah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah's blessings and mercy be upon him and throughout history. And perhaps Imam Ghazali faced a similar predicament. He grew up in a time and he was raised and he learned. He was a genius. But he grew up in a time in a society that was obsessed. I think we can use that term relatively generously. They were infatuated with Greek philosophy. Not necessarily in a bad way. This was just, it was the flavor of the day at their time. And Imam Ghazali, being a person of his time, may Allah have mercy upon him, was interested in the same things. And you could say he got caught up with it. Again, not necessarily in a bad way, but in a way that made Imam Ghazali feel a sense of spiritual peace. He addressed the issues of Greek philosophy. He deconstructed a lot of their reasoning. It was unbelievable, but this didn't quench his spiritual thirst. May Allah have mercy upon him. So, and this is historically documented, at the age of 37, when Imam Ghazali was on top of the world, he was at the pinnacle of academia, of Islamic scholarship. Everybody in the world knew him. At the age of 37, he left all of his posts. He left every one of his responsibilities with regards to Islamic scholarship for 10 years in his prime, seeking spiritual respite. Until eventually he returned after 10 years with his magnum opus, Ihya Ulumuddin, and his later works, of course. But we see that this identity crisis is not unique to us. It is not a novel predicament. We at times feel as if we're struggling between being Muslim and being American, similar to the Ansar struggle between being Mennonites and being Muslim, similar to Ghazali's struggle between being an integral member of Abbasid society and culture and being Muslim. But in the midst of this struggle, one very cardinal principle must always be made absolutely clear. And that is that Islam didn't come to remove us from our societies and cultures per se, but rather to enhance and refine our existence within our society, within our culture, on every level. Spiritual, psychological, academic, economical, social, on every single level. Islam did not come to abrogate and negate everything in Meccan culture, just as it didn't come to do away with everything in our American culture. This is true. It came to engage us where we are, to uplift us, to be the perfect marriage between this world and the next, to strive to achieve spiritual excellence, yes, but spiritual excellence as well as political excellence, as well as social excellence, as well as economic excellence, as well as financial, every single category. So there's nothing inherently wrong with being Meccan, just as there's nothing inherently wrong with being American. In fact, these dualities, as Ali is a bigot would call them, are not diametrically opposed. They're not complete opposites. And this is the beauty of our deen. This is the beauty of our way of life. Islam purifies and perfects everything that it touches. It creates the best American, just as it created the best Americans. Imam Muslim narrates the Prophet ﷺ one time visiting his wife, Maymuna, may Allah be pleased with her, who happened to be the aunt, the maternal aunt of companion Khaled. So the Prophet ﷺ went to visit Maymuna, and he was accompanied by her nephew Khaled, may Allah be pleased with them all. And he went, and they visited, and they went to sit down for dinner, and at this dinner, a dish was presented to the Prophet ﷺ that consisted of cooked lizard. It was a lizard that was cooked. And the Prophet ﷺ was told what this dish was, and he chose not to eat from that dish. In fact, he didn't even extend his hand to eat from this dish. And Khaled, may Allah be pleased with him, was sitting with him, and he asked, why aren't you eating down to the law? Is it because this is haram? That's a reasonable conclusion to reach. This is the messenger of God, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Is he not eating it because it's not permissible? What's the reason that you don't eat it? The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, and listen to this. It may sound maybe not so profound and surface, but it is very profound. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا, no, ولكنه ليس لم يكن بأرضكم. No, exactly. It's not haram. But I'm not eating it because it's not from the land of my people. It's not from my popular culture. It's not something that I'm used to. You go ahead and do that. You can eat it if you want. This was a dish that was popular in Najd. It was a delicacy. But for me, I'm from Quraysh originally. I'm Mecca, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, albeit the best of them. But this is what I'm used to. And this is not from my traditions of my culture that I'm used to on a cultural level. The Prophet ﷺ was Meccan, was from Quraysh, and he had inclination towards the taste and food that his people had. The companions were from the Arabian Peninsula. They had an inclination towards the art of their people, mainly poetry at the time. We never find the Prophet ﷺ or the companions trying to do away with their culture. Instead, we find them fully cognizant of the importance that culture plays and society plays. It's also narrated in Sahih Bukhari that the Prophet ﷺ, following the conquest of Mecca, he tells Aisha that I would like to rebuild the Kaaba the way it was built at the time of Prophet Abraham, because it was different. They say it wasn't as tall. They say you could do tawaf around the Kaaba while your hand was touching the roof of the Kaaba. It wasn't very tall. It had two doors instead of the one. So people say it didn't even have a roof. Nonetheless, the Prophet ﷺ is telling Aisha in passing after the conquest of Mecca, I would love to rebuild the Kaaba as if, or in the way, in a structural manner, which it was built at the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam. But then he goes on to say, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because, paraphrasing, I know the social repercussions of doing that. I know how much my people, a lot of them who are newly minted Muslims after the conquest of Mecca, how much they cherish this holy site. For me to tear it down, it wouldn't be a good look. This is so profound. The social awareness of the Prophet ﷺ, fully aware of the social consequences of his ideas and not ignoring them, but respecting them in a responsible way. It's also well known that the Prophet ﷺ, during the Battle of Hunayn, the 8th year after Hijrah, when he and the Muslim army approached Hunayn, which was a valley, the enemy battalions had gotten wind or caught wind that the Muslim army was approaching, and so they all took posts on the edge and the peaks of the valley. And the second they saw the Prophet ﷺ setting up camp in kind of Muslim army kind of with their guard down, at that instant they all agreed that they would ambush the Muslims with a barrage of arrows. Now I want us to imagine this. The Prophet ﷺ is sitting there, he's with an army of 10, 12,000 strong, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And a lot of the people, mind you, in this army are Muslims who only accepted Islam 4 weeks prior after the conquest of Mecca. So when they saw this barrage of arrows coming down, chaos and confusion ensued, and a lot of these Muslims began to retreat and run and look for cover. And again, look at the social awareness of the best of creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Look at his respect for the power that he knew his people's culture had on them. He saw them running, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he called out to them, أَنَا النَّبِيُّ لَا كَذِبْ أَنَا ابْنُ عَبْدِ الْمُطَّلِبِ, that I am the prophet. There is no doubt about that. And I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. I am the son of the chieftain of Quraysh, this man that was so highly revered by everybody in that land. This is the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam speaking, knowing very well the pride that his people took in their Meccan heritage and called upon this pride and their cultural sensitivities to draw them back. The Prophet ﷺ was the most complete of human beings. He was fully aware of the cultural values at his time and sought to preserve their integrity where permissible and use them appropriately. He knew he was Meccan, and he never disavowed his Meccan. In fact, he used it in the most beautiful and intelligent of ways. The Prophet ﷺ was Meccan, was from Quraysh, and we are American. We are Muslim first and foremost. But we don't have to choose. We don't have to denounce. We don't have to denounce in absolute terms our Americanism. In fact, being Muslim makes us better Americans. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم استغفروه إنه هو الحمد لله ثم الحمد لله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a verse that we refer to all the time, anytime we have an interfaith event, a verse that just exudes meaning every time you read it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O people, we have made you men and women and made you from various nations and different tribes so that you may so that you may get to know one another, yes, but also get to know your own nation and your own cultural tendencies and champion them when appropriate." And what is the barometer of what's appropriate? إِنَّ أَكْرَمَكُمْ عِندَ اللَّهِ أَتْقَاكُمْ إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَلِيمٌ خَبِيرٌ. Revelation. God, Allah, that is the barometer. That is who decides what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And while the Prophet ﷺ was Meccan, while the Muhajirin were predominantly Meccan, while the Ansar were predominantly Mennonites, and Ghazali was from Khorasan, and we are American. And we don't necessarily have to forego our culture. We don't have to apologize to anyone for being American. We don't necessarily either choose between being Muslim and being American because the choice doesn't exist. Well, this is true and self-evident in the life of the Prophet ﷺ, in the life of his companions, and in our rich history. There are things that are clearly abrogated, that are clearly wrong. Ibrahim alayhi salam grew up in Iraq, Mesopotamia, whatever you call it, in the region of Palestine later on in his life. And it was popular at his time for people to worship idols. There was no hemming and hawing about idol worshiping. There are certain things, like idolatry, that are clearly impermissible. And we know what Ibrahim alayhi salam did to the idols. There are cultural issues. There are black and white. Like gambling, like alcohol, like fornication, like usury, like oppression. The list goes on and on and on. And if these are parts of our cultures, we can't finesse that. There's no working with that. We can't preserve these norms. These things we have to disavow unequivocally, in a responsible way, but unequivocally. Because there are many virtues in capitalism, there are many virtues in socialism, there are many virtues in feminism, there are many virtues in egalitarianism, there are many virtues in, you name the ism, stoicism, there are so many virtues in all of these. And as Americans, we are influenced by these isms, and we can take from the best of them. But at the same time, knowing full well that we have a codified way of life ordained to us by our Creator and taught to us by the best of creation, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And that takes precedence over any of these philosophies, while still enhancing all of the positive messages in these philosophies. Because it may be convenient to adopt a concept of modernity or the flavor of the day, but we have to do our due diligence in knowing our religious values, and knowing where these concepts contradict them. Primarily through knowing Allah's words, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and studying the life of His Messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الناس قد جاءكم برهان من ربكم وأنزلنا إليكم نورا مبينا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيرة من أمرهم ومن يعص الله ورسوله فقد ضل ضلالا مبينا. Allah says, O people, a clear guide has been sent out to you, a clear barometer of what is right and what is wrong. And it is not for a believing man nor a believing woman that if they find that Allah and His Messenger decree something, that they have their own opinion, a contradicting opinion. We can be Muslim and American. They're not mutually exclusive. Being Muslim is our choice, and that's the thing we pride ourselves in both. And being American is Allah's qadr. This is what Allah has chosen for us. As Muslims, we can and should champion the virtues of this culture of ours as our pious predecessors did theirs, doing so while knowing that the ultimate truth, the final say is with our Creator. Doing so within the boundaries of our theology, knowing that we derive our values from revelation. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. عباد الله إن الله أمرنا بأمر عظيم إذ قال إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اغفر للمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات إنك يا مولانا قريب سميع مجيب الدعوات. اللهم فك قيد أسرانا وأسرى المسلمين. اللهم فك قيد أسرانا وأسرى المسلمين يا رب العالمين. اللهم كن إخواننا المستضعفين في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها يا رب العالمين إنك على كل شيء قدير. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. وأقم الصلاة.